Can you imagine what that would feel like? If your own home, the one place you should feel the most comfortable, suddenly felt like a confusing, foreign landscape. It's a really unsettling thought, right? But for so many aging adults, it's their daily reality. So today, we're going to dive into why this happens and, more importantly, what we can do to help.
This quote, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? The world on the outside is exactly the same, but that internal compass, that mental map we all just take for granted, it's starting to go on the fritz. It's such a subtle shift, but it's also incredibly profound, and you can imagine, really frightening.
You know, to make this real, let's talk about someone like Mrs. Harris. For over 40 years, her home was basically an extension of herself. She knew every creak in the floorboards. But now, that connection is fraying. She's getting lost in the very hallways that hold a lifetime of her memories. And it is so crucial to understand this is not just simple forgetfulness. It's a fundamental change in how she's perceiving the world around her. So what is actually going on inside the brain when this starts to happen? This isn't a choice. It's not a matter of someone not paying attention. There's a real biological reason for this confusion, and it's tied to the very part of our brain that acts like our internal GPS. The official term for this is spatial disorientation. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like your brain's map has just become totally unreliable. Imagine you pull up your navigation app and it shows you're in the middle of an ocean when you know you're standing in your kitchen. That's the kind of disconnect we're talking about. The hippocampus, that's the part of the brain that handles our memory and our sense of direction, it starts to get glitchy, making a safe, predictable home feel like a maze you can't solve. So, how does this actually show up in everyday life? Well, you might see your loved one constantly walk into the pantry when they were looking for the bathroom, or they might seem really anxious and hesitant just moving from the living room to the bedroom. And that nighttime pacing, the wandering, a lot of the time, that's just a search for something familiar in a world that's become confusing, especially when it gets dark. And listen to this, because this is a really critical point. Research is actually showing that this kind of spatial confusion can be one of the earliest signs of cognitive change. Sometimes it shows up years before the more obvious memory problems that we tend to look for. That's why noticing these behaviors, not just quizzing them on names or dates, is so incredibly important for getting support in place early. Okay, this brings us to what I think is the most important part of our whole conversation today. It's a huge shift in perspective. What if these behaviors that seem so difficult or confusing aren't the problem? What if they're actually a form of communication, a solution even? Right here, you can see two totally different ways of looking at the exact same behavior. On the surface, what we see might look like agitation or stubbornness, when a loved one just refuses to go into a certain room. But if we look deeper, what we're really seeing is a person desperately trying to find safety and get back a little bit of control in a world that just doesn't make sense to them anymore. So it all boils down to this. They're not trying to be difficult. Every time they seem lost or resistant, they're asking a fundamental question. They're asking, where am I and how can I feel safe again? Understanding that completely transforms our role as caregivers. We stop trying to correct a behavior and start trying to answer a need. Okay, so with this new way of looking at things, how can we actually help? The goal isn't to fix their internal map, that's out of our control. The goal is to make the external world so clear, so predictable, and so safe that their unreliable map just becomes less of a problem. So let's get into some real actionable strategies. First up, we can simplify their environment. Think of these as creating big, unmissable signposts. A simple sign that just says bathroom can prevent a world of anxiety. Painting a doorframe in a color that pops against the wall? That turns a confusing wall of sameness into a clear destination. And good, even lighting, it gets rid of those tricky shadows that can really play tricks on your perception. Next, we have to lean into the power of predictability. When that mental map is gone, a solid routine becomes the new map. A favorite family photo placed right next to the bedroom door becomes a landmark. Keeping the furniture in the exact same place provides a sense of stability. A consistent morning routine following the same path from the bed to the bathroom to the kitchen, that creates a behavioral map that they can really rely on. And finally, our own communication is probably our most powerful tool. So instead of a sharp, no, the bathroom is over there, which can feel really shaming, a gentle, hey, let's go this way together, offers partnership and guidance. A calm, quiet environment helps reduce sensory overload, making it way easier for their brain to focus. We become their co-pilot, not their critic. All right, let's just quickly tackle a couple of common questions. First, why do they suddenly get lost at home? It's because the brain's connections are faltering. It's like a file on a computer has been corrupted. And is wandering dangerous? Well, the impulse behind it, that search for something familiar, that's not dangerous, but it can definitely lead to unsafe situations. The key is to create a safe space for that impulse to happen, while putting simple safeguards, like alarms, on the exits.
So as we start to wrap this up, let's circle back to our central idea. We can't always bring them back to the home that they remember in their mind, but what we can do is help them feel at home right where they are, in this new reality.
This is really the ultimate takeaway. Every single one of these small actions, a label on a door, a comforting hand on an arm, a predictable routine, it's a message. It's a nonverbal communication that bypasses that confused cognitive map and speaks directly to the nervous system, saying over and over again, you are safe, you are home, you belong here.
And so I'll just leave you with this question to think about. When we stop seeing these actions as symptoms that need to be managed, and we start seeing them as a language that needs to be understood, everything can change. How might that one shift in perspective empower you on your own journey?